The moment Tara shoved the stranger's hand off her colleague's arm, she felt nothing but certainty. It was the right thing to do. What she didn't feel, couldn't have felt, was the particular horror of recognizing that same hand the following morning, extended toward a boardroom full of people, as their new managing director introduced himself. His name was Donovan Ashby. Tara stood near the back of the conference room at Meridian Legal Group's Toronto office, clutching her coffee with both hands like it might anchor her to the floor. 37 floors up, with Lake Ontario glittering in the distance and 40 colleagues applauding a man she had slapped across the face less than 12 hours ago. She did not applaud. She turned very slightly toward the window and prayed to every quiet god she'd ever half believed in that he had not seen her yet. He had. She knew it from the way his eyes paused for exactly one beat too long on the left side of the room before he smiled at the partners and said something gracious about being glad to be back in Canada. She felt that pause like a cold hand at the back of her neck. The night before had started innocently enough. Meridian's junior associates had taken Priscilla out for her birthday. Dinner at a place on King Street, where the cocktails were too expensive and the lighting was forgiving, followed by dancing at a club a few blocks east that Tara had never been to and immediately didn't like. The music was too loud. The air smelled like dry ice and someone's cologne. She'd been nursing a sparkling water for 40 minutes, watching Priscilla actually enjoy herself for once and thinking about the motion she needed to file by Thursday. She had almost missed it entirely. Priscilla had gone to the bar for another round, and when Tara looked up from her phone, she spotted her colleague across the room, near the private lounge entrance, with a man she didn't recognize standing extremely close. Priscilla's face wasn't right. It was the face of someone laughing when they don't want to be, smiling because they can't figure out how to stop. The man had his hand on her wrist. Tara didn't think. That was the truth of it. She genuinely did not stop to think. She crossed the floor in about 8 seconds, stepped between them, and pushed his arm away with enough force that he took a step back. "She's with me," Tara said. "We're leaving." The man looked at her with an expression that was hard to read, somewhere between surprise and something else, something that wasn't anger exactly. He started to say something. Tara didn't wait. She had Priscilla by the elbow and they were moving toward the exit before he finished his sentence. Outside, Priscilla let out a long breath and said, "Oh, thank God." And then, "I didn't know how to get out of that." They took a cab home. Tara made tea. She thought that was the end of it. It was not the end of it. Standing in the back of Meridian's glass-walled conference room, watching Donovan Ashby shake hands with the senior partners, Tara did a rapid and humiliating reconstruction of the previous night. The private lounge, not a random crowded corner of the club, the private lounge, the kind of place with a guest list, the tailored dress shirt, which she had registered as slightly too nice, but had attributed to general vanity. The way he hadn't chased after them, which she had taken as proof of guilt, and which now looked a great deal more like quiet bewilderment. What had Priscilla actually said about him? Tara replayed it. Priscilla, in the cab, grateful and slightly giddy. "I don't even know who he was. One of the partner's guests, I think?" And Tara had nodded and not asked more questions because she'd been relieved it was over. One of the partner's guests. Right. She slipped out of the conference room before the applause had fully died down and went back to her desk and sat there for a moment, with her hands flat on the surface, breathing. Her closest friend at the firm, a contracts associate named Bex, who had been with Meridian for 6 years and knew everything about everyone, materialized beside her with a cup of coffee she hadn't asked for. "You look like you've seen something upsetting." "I'm fine." "You're the color of printer paper." "I said I'm fine, Bex." Bex set the coffee down anyway and perched on the edge of Tara's desk. "He's 34, youngest managing director in the firm's history. Did 2 years in Vancouver, 2 in London, now back here. Apparently he's quite good." She paused. "Also quite good looking. Not that I imagine that's relevant to your current situation." Tara looked up. "What current situation?" Bex gave her a long, patient look. "Tara, I've known you for 4 years. You only get that particular shade of paper white when you've done something professionally inadvisable. I haven't done anything. Then, why are you breathing like that?" Tara picked up the coffee. "Go away, Bex." Bex went away, but she looked unconvinced. The thing about Tara was that she had built her entire career at Meridian on being unflappable. She'd grown up in Halifax, the oldest of 4 kids, with a mother who worked nights at the hospital, and a father who coached hockey and ran a tight ship. You did not cry in the Hennessy house. You handled things. You figured it out and you moved forward, and you did not, under any circumstances, make the problem worse by panicking. She had carried that sensibility through her law degree at Dalhousie, through articling in Ottawa, through 5 years at Meridian, where she'd made senior associate at 31, and was quietly, without making a big deal of it, considered one of the better litigation minds on the floor. She did not shove her own managing director in a nightclub. Except, evidently she did. She spent the morning methodically getting through work, which helped. There was always work. That was one reliable thing about litigation. The deadlines didn't care what you'd done the night before. She filed the motion. She returned 3 calls. She drafted a letter she'd been putting off. By noon, she had almost convinced herself that he simply hadn't recognized her, that the room had been dark enough, and he'd been sufficiently surprised that the whole thing had blurred in his memory into an anonymous face. Then his assistant appeared at her office door. "Mr. Ashby would like to see you," the assistant said pleasantly. "He's free at 2. Tara smiled with all the muscles in her face. "Of course." She spent the next hour considering her options, which were limited. She could say she hadn't realized who he was, which was true. She could apologize, which was reasonable. She could resign, which was dramatic, but would at least spare her the conversation. She didn't actually want to resign. She liked her job. She was good at her job. She had a rent payment due, and a vacation booked in March, and a storage locker full of her grandmother's furniture that she'd been meaning to sort through for 2 years, and none of that would sort itself if she was unemployed. She went to his office at 2. He was standing at the window when she knocked. The floor-to-ceiling kind that looked out over the financial district, the skyline doing its impressive Toronto thing in the gray November light. He turned when she came in, and she had approximately 4 seconds to register that he looked, in daylight, significantly more composed than she felt, before she decided the best strategy was to go first. "I owe you an apology," she said. "I saw my colleague in a situation that alarmed me, and I reacted without getting the full picture. That was impulsive, and I'm sorry." Donovan Ashby looked at her for a moment. He had the particular stillness of someone who was used to rooms waiting for him to speak. "She works here," he said. "Yes. She's a junior associate. It was her birthday." He nodded slowly. "The event was for a client of the firm. I'd just been introduced to a number of people, and she'd mentioned she was a lawyer. We were talking." A pause. "That's all we were doing. I understand that now. She seemed uncomfortable, so I was trying to give her space to leave if she wanted. I wasn't doing a very good job of it." Tara absorbed this. It had the specific texture of something true, clumsy but genuinely well-intentioned, which was somehow worse than if he'd been actually awful. "I see," she said. "For what it's worth, I wasn't planning to mention it," he said. "I asked to see you because I wanted to talk about the Carver file. Your name is on it, and I've been reading through the background. I have some questions." She blinked. "If that's all right," he said, with the faintest possible suggestion of something that was not quite a smile. She sat down. They talked about the Carver file for 45 minutes. He was, as Bex had said, quite good. He asked sharp questions, the kind that cut straight to the part of the problem she'd been most uncertain about. And he listened to her answers without interrupting, which in Tara's experience was rarer than it should have been. By the end of the meeting, she had 3 new things to consider for the case, and a vague feeling of having been assessed without knowing exactly when it had happened. Walking back to her office, she passed Bex in the hallway. "Well?" Bex said. "We talked about the Carver file," Tara said. Bex stared at her. "That's it?" "That's it, Tara. Bex." Bex fell into step beside her. "That man asked specifically for the junior associate list during his briefing this morning. You were the first name on it. Now he's calling you in to discuss your casework on day 1. I have been at this firm for 6 years, and I know what that looks like." "It looks like he's doing his job," Tara said firmly, and went back to her desk, and tried very hard to believe that. December came, the way December always comes to Toronto, dark early, cold in a way that felt personal. The city lit up against the gray sky with a kind of defiant cheerfulness. Tara worked. Donovan Ashby had made his presence felt in the office, in a way that was hard to pin down precisely. He ran leaner meetings. He responded to emails at unusual hours. He had a habit of appearing in doorways to ask a single specific question and then leaving, which unnerved people who weren't used to it. He called Tara in twice more in the first month, both times to discuss active cases, both times sharp and professional, and over in less time than she'd expected. She told herself the meetings were unremarkable. They were not entirely unremarkable. There was a particular quality to his attention when she was speaking that she found, somewhat against her will, difficult to ignore. He was focused in a way that most people weren't. He didn't glance at his phone. He didn't look past her at something more interesting. When she made a point he found useful, he would nod once, in a specific way, and Tara had started to notice, to her considerable annoyance, that she was looking for that nod. It was Bex who finally named it, at a Friday evening drink with 3 of the associates that had become a semi-regular thing. "You light up when you talk about him," Bex said. "I absolutely do not. You do. You get this look." She demonstrated a look that Tara found offensive. "I'm talking about case strategy. You're talking about case strategy and you have that look." "Bex, he is the managing director of our firm. I'm aware. That's not a minor consideration. I know. I'm just telling you what I see." Bex took a sip of her wine. "Also, Priscilla told me he asked about you last week. Casually. In passing. Asked how long you'd been at the firm." Tara set down her glass with slightly more precision than necessary. "She thought it was professional interest," Bex added. "It is professional interest," Tara said. "Obviously." She meant it when she said it. The Christmas party was at a hotel in the Distillery District, the firm's annual attempt at being festive, which mostly succeeded. Tara arrived with Bex and stayed longer than she'd planned, because the food was good and someone had organized dancing, and it turned out that Priscilla was a surprisingly excellent dancer, which was delightful. She was on her second glass of wine and had genuinely forgotten to be careful when Donovan appeared beside her at the edge of the room. "You look like you're having a better time than you expected," he said. "The bar was low," she said, before she could think about whether that was a wise thing to say to her managing director. He laughed. It was a real laugh, a bit surprised, and it changed his face in a way that she noticed and immediately tried to unnotice. They stood together for a while at the edge of the dance floor, not dancing, just watching, talking about nothing in particular. His family was from Calgary. He'd done his law degree at UBC. He'd taken the London posting, partly because he'd never lived abroad, and partly because he'd needed the distance from a relationship that had gone badly wrong. He said this last part simply, without self-pity, and moved past it quickly, the way people do when they've finished processing something and don't need it anymore. Tara told him about Halifax, about growing up with 3 younger brothers in a house that was always loud, about choosing Dalhousie specifically because it wasn't too far from home, and then realizing in second year that she was more like her mother than she'd thought, that she needed the work, that it settled something in her that nothing else did. "You're good at it," he said. "The work." "So are you," she said. They looked at each other for a moment. The music was doing something low and slow. Someone near them laughed at something. The moment had a particular quality to it, held, and slightly charged, and aware of itself. And Tara felt it with a clarity that was inconvenient and impossible to misread. "I should probably check in with the partners," he said, which was almost certainly true. "Of course," she said. He left. She went and found Bex and did not say a single word about it, and Bex, who knew her well enough, did not ask. She took a cab home alone and sat in the back seat, watching the December streets go past and thought, "This is fine. This is manageable. This is not a problem." She was wrong about that. January arrived with a cold snap that dropped Toronto to -20 and froze the pipes in Tara's building, which meant she spent 2 days working from the cafe on the corner and eating soup for every meal. She was there on a Tuesday afternoon, laptop open, working through depositions when Donovan walked in. He stopped when he saw her. She looked up. The pipes were still frozen. There was nowhere else to go. He ordered a coffee and sat across from her without being asked, and they worked in the same space for 2 hours, mostly in silence, occasionally one of them saying something about whatever was on their screen. And Tara found it, with a feeling she didn't want to look at too directly, completely natural. "Are the pipes fixed yet?" he asked when they were both packing up. "Tomorrow. Supposedly. There's a decent cafe near my building if you need somewhere tomorrow. Better Wi-Fi." She looked at him. He looked back at her with that particular steadiness. "That would be helpful," she said carefully. "Thank you." He wrote down the address on a slip of paper like it was 1987, which made her smile despite herself, and left. She looked at the address for a long moment. Then she folded it and put it in her coat pocket. She did not go the next day, because the pipes were fixed by morning. But she kept the slip of paper. Winter moved through its paces. Tara won the Carver case, which went the way she'd known it would go, once she'd sorted out the 2 things Donovan had flagged in that first meeting. She tried not to think about the fact that she'd found those things because of him. The celebration drinks afterward were in the boardroom with the partners, and Donovan raised his glass and said something brief and accurate about the quality of the work, and she felt the nod, the particular nod, from across the room. And Bex, who was standing beside her, said nothing for once, just looked at Tara's face and looked away again. February. A late Thursday. Everyone else had gone home. Tara was still at her desk revising a brief when she heard footsteps in the hall. She knew by now the particular sound of his walk, which was something she refused to think too hard about, and he appeared in her doorway. "Still here?" he said. Brief is due Friday. It's 11. She looked at the clock. It was in fact 11. She'd stopped noticing. He came in without being invited, which he'd started doing, and stood looking at her bookshelf the way people do when they don't quite want to leave. There was a photo there. Her and her brothers at her youngest brother's graduation 2 summers ago, all of them squinting into the sun. Your family? He said. My brothers. That's Corey's graduation. He's a nurse now, which my dad still hasn't completely processed. Why? My dad coached hockey. He's proud of Corey, genuinely. He just keeps accidentally calling it nursing school instead of nursing program, which drives Corey absolutely crazy. Donovan laughed. My dad did something similar. I practiced law for 2 years before he stopped calling it articling. Did you correct him? Every time. Did it work? Not once. He turned away from the shelf. He was looking at her now in a particular way, direct and unhurried, and she had the sensation she sometimes got in her best moments in court, the sense of things becoming clear just before they resolved. Tara, he said, Donovan, I'd like to take you to dinner. The room was very quiet. 11 o'clock in an emptied office, the city lights on the other side of the glass doing their cold February thing. You're the managing director, she said. I know. That's genuinely complicated. I know that too. He didn't look away. I'm not asking impulsively. I've thought about it for a while. I understand if the answer is no. She looked at him for a long moment. In her career, she had argued in front of difficult judges, handled clients who lied to her face, stayed composed in rooms where things were going badly wrong. She had never particularly struggled with the right answer. Saturday, she said. Dinner on Saturday. Something shifted in his expression, not a big shift, just something quiet and certain. Saturday, he agreed. He picked up his coat from the chair where he'd left it. Go home, Tara. The brief will still be there at 8 tomorrow. She went home. She sat in her apartment with the lights still off for a minute or two before she turned them on. Then she called Bex, who did not say I told you so even once, which was a genuine act of friendship. Dinner was at a small Italian place in Rosedale that she hadn't been to. Linen tablecloths, good wine list, the kind of restaurant where the noise level allowed actual conversation. They talked for 3 hours. Not about work. They'd both seemed to silently agree on that without discussing it. They talked about everything else. The particular loneliness of being good at something and not being sure that's enough. His family in Calgary, a father who had wanted him to take over the family business and accepted his son's choice with a grace that hadn't come easily. Her mother, who had worked 12-hour hospital shifts for 20 years and never once made her children feel like a burden, and who had said, when Tara got into law school, simply, I knew. He walked her to a cab at the end of the night. On the sidewalk, in the February cold, he said, Can I take you to dinner again? And she said yes, and he smiled. The real one, the surprised one, she'd first seen at the Christmas party. And she got in the cab and looked at her own reflection in the window going home and thought, oh, this is what this is. It was spring before Tara told her mother. She'd been waiting, not from hiding exactly, but from the particular caution of someone who knows what she has and doesn't want to be careless with it. Her mother drove up from Halifax in April when the snow was finally finished, and they walked along the waterfront, and Tara said, there's someone, and her mother said, I know, because her mother always knew. Is he good? Her mother asked. Not handsome or successful, just good. Yes, Tara said, he's genuinely good. Her mother nodded, satisfied. Then, good. It was June before Priscilla figured it out. They were careful at work, thoughtful about it, which mattered to Tara and which Donovan understood without needing a lot of explanation. But Priscilla was perceptive and she'd noticed small things that added up, and on a Tuesday in June she appeared in Tara's doorway with a look on her face that was equal parts amused and delighted. Oh my God, Priscilla said. It's the guy from the club. Tara put down her pen. Priscilla, the guy you pushed, that's him. Priscilla's delight was becoming quite large. You shoved your managing director in a nightclub. I didn't shove, you absolutely shoved him. Tara covered her face with one hand. I don't want to talk about this, Tara. Priscilla sat down, barely containing herself. He's in love with you. Anyone with eyes can see it. A pause. And you pushed him, on my behalf. She looked genuinely touched by this. That is the most romantic origin story I've ever heard. It is not romantic, Tara said from behind her hand. It is, Priscilla said firmly. It really, genuinely is. Tara lowered her hand, looked at her colleague across the desk. Outside the window, June was doing its best, warm and bright, the city looking like it always did in early summer, when everyone remembered why they'd chosen to live here. She thought about February, the slip of paper with the cafe address, the quiet office at 11 o'clock, the way he'd said her name like it was something he'd been thinking about for longer than the question he was about to ask. Don't tell anyone, she said. Priscilla pressed her lips together, clearly delighted. I won't tell anyone, she absolutely told Bex, who already knew, so it didn't count. July was warm. Tara's youngest brother Corey came to visit from Halifax for a long weekend, and on the Saturday, she had them both to her apartment for dinner. Donovan and Corey on the balcony with drinks while she finished cooking, the sound of them talking and occasionally laughing drifting in through the open door. She stood in her kitchen with the window above the sink open and the summer smell coming in off the street and thought, This exact thing, Corey said, on the drive to the airport Sunday evening. I like him a lot. He listened when you talked about the Carver case. Not just waiting for his turn. Actually listened. I know, Tara said. Mom's going to be happy. Mom already knew. Corey laughed. Of course she did. There were hard moments, too. In August, a senior partner raised an eyebrow, not explicitly but unmistakably, at a meeting where both their names were on the agenda. And Tara felt it, and it made her angry in the clean, clarifying way she trusted. She talked to Donovan about it that evening, sitting on his apartment balcony overlooking the city, and he said, without drama, that if there were concerns about professional propriety, they'd address them directly and transparently, that he wasn't interested in pretending, that she didn't have to manage this alone. I know, she said. Do you? He looked at her. Because I've noticed that you default to handling things by yourself. I'm working on it, she said. He smiled. I know. They addressed it. Transparently, as he'd said. There was a process and they followed it and it was not entirely comfortable. But Tara had never minded discomfort when the path through it was clear. September, the firm's annual retreat, a long weekend at a lodge in Muskoka, with 40 people and enough activities to fill a week. Tara had always found these things mildly exhausting and managed them by finding one good conversation per day and calling that sufficient. On the Saturday evening, there was a bonfire by the lake, and she and Donovan ended up sitting apart from the group at the end of a dock with their feet above the water, the Muskoka dark around them and the fire behind, and the stars, doing what stars do in September in northern Ontario. He was quiet for a while, looking at the water. What are you thinking about? She asked. November, he said. What about November? He turned to look at her. Tara, he said, in the particular way he said her name when he was saying something real. I want you to meet my parents. In Calgary in November if you can. I want to introduce you properly. A beat. I want them to know who you are. She looked at him across the dock in the dark. The fiver was behind them. The water was very still. She thought about her mother walking on the Halifax waterfront, asking is he good in that precise way. About Corey in the airport, he listened. About a slip of paper with a cafe address she still had somewhere in her coat pocket. Yes, she said. November, I'd like that. He reached across and took her hand, and they stayed there on the dock for a while longer, saying nothing, which was exactly enough.